Greetings everyone, this is SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, here to bring you another episode review from Season 5 of The Loud House. Today's episode is titled, For Sale by Loner. First we'll discuss the plot, and then my thoughts and critiques with my final score. So, let's get right into it. The episode begins with Mr. Grouse finally getting fed up with the Louds as his neighbors and decides to sell his house. He tries living at other places around Royal Woods, but they aren't the right fit for him. He finds some tranquility at Flip's mom's cabin in the woods, but quickly grows very bored of his new lifestyle. He tries to befriend Mr. Bullhoffner, of all people, but his loud family-style attempts to be neighborly causes him to get on Bullhoffner's bad side. Grouse admits to missing his old neighbors, and when the Louds come to tell him his house is being sold, he races back to his old home and persuades the new owners to reconsider their purchase, and he easily gets back what he thought he'd never have again. Well, that concludes the plot of the episode, so now we come to my thoughts and critiques. By this point in the series, it never crossed my mind that Mr. Grouse would ever have an episode where he's the main star and not sharing the lead with another member of the Loud family. But surprisingly, it finally happened, and this episode played very well to the kind of character he's always been when it comes to his living arrangements. I always wondered how long it would take for him to finally say enough is enough with his neighbors, and with that, now I can make the one joke I've been wanting to make for a long time. Louds, this is the final straw. I'm going to move so far away that I will be able to brag about it. I would rather tear out my brainstem, carry it out in the middle of the nearest four-way intersection, and skip rope with it than go on living where I do now. Ah, that feels so good to say. But in all seriousness, when you look through the series and this episode in particular, Mr. Grouse is like the Squidward of the Loud House. His neighbors can annoy him in any way possible, even if they aren't doing it intentionally, and a lot of his anger towards them is not without merit. I mean, wouldn't you want to move far away from this family of 13 after years and years of constant torment? I know I would, so him wanting to move out of the neighborhood was going to be inevitable. However, he's been living next door to them for who knows how long, and apparently developed some of their mannerisms. His behavior around Bullhoffner was an exact copy of how the Loud family acts around him. If you think about it, for a brief moment, Mr. Grouse became a Loud, and Bullhoffner became Mr. Grouse. It was like Squidward acting like SpongeBob and Patrick in Squidville, embracing the behavior he wanted to get away from. That's the weirdest thing, and sort of interesting when you think about the kind of relationship Grouse has developed with his neighbors compared to everyone else on Franklin Avenue. It seems like people on their street come and go very quickly, and yet Mr. Grouse always stays. So he has a better understanding of his neighbors than anyone else, and how they're more of a family to him than he realizes. Deep down, he knew he was missing his neighbors, and those pictures he had of them on his phone really tugged at his heartstrings, mine included. I'll venture a few guesses and say his picture with Lynn was from the episode Good Sports, Lily's from Breaking Dad, and Lola's from Diamonds Are For Never, although I'm not sure why Hops was there. When you think about how he acted towards those three kids in those individual episodes, each of them may have gotten on his nerves at first, but he grew to respect them before the episode was over. The point is, without the Louds, no matter how much unintended misery they can cause, his life can be sad and lonely despite the much-needed tranquility he desires. Even the montage of him enjoying his alone time and then becoming bored of it was just like what happened to Squidward when he moved to Tentacle Acres and started regretting his decision. Those two characters realize peace and quiet is great, but having a little spontaneousness keeps their lives interesting, if that makes any sense. Now, I could say the exact opposite for Squidward regarding SpongeBob episodes made after the first movie, but let's not open that can of worms. In short, this episode gave Mr. Grouse some good character development, and he grew to appreciate the people he thought he could do without. It was also a good moment for the Loud family as well, since they traveled all the way to the cabin to give their former neighbor a pie and tell him what was going on at his old house. If they didn't care about him, they would have never bothered to ask where he was, and they would have simply continued about their business as if him moving out wasn't a big deal. The little homesick embrace just said everything that needed to be said. The only thing I didn't like about the happy ending was how rushed it was. They only had a minute to reset the status quo, and I think it would have been better if they gave Mr. Grouse a mini arc where he stays at the cabin and eventually returns to his old house. At least those new neighbors would have been given a more thorough chance to get to know the Louds. Instead, that couple was rushed out of their neighborhood in a matter of seconds. The trope, status quo is God, was really working working overtime during those final 60 seconds. Anyway, moving on to something completely different, this episode also had a few humorous moments. It turns out Cheryl and Meryl own a rental condo and fully embrace the country western lifestyle when they aren't working. So that's what they mean by boot scootin'. How do you like that? Flip debuts a new salesman alias, Rick's Rent and Rocks. Also, am I the only one who thought it was kind of weirdly funny how Mr. Grouse thought this new Flip persona was part of some hidden camera show? Someone in the writing room should have thought of this idea a long time ago. And finally, Mr. Bullhoffner makes a cameo and references his cabin from Rumor Has It. Gotta love that past episode consistency. He mentions how he bought the cabin for peace and quiet, and yet, unlike his new and bothersome neighbor, it's probably just for a quick getaway before having to get back to Royal Woods to be a teacher during the week. I could be wrong, but hopefully you get my point. So to wrap things up, I only have one last joke to make. Imagine Mr. Grouse was living at that cabin for months and months, all alone with no human contact, and one day he lost that rock he bought from Flip. He would have lost his only friend, and much like Tom Hanks, there would have only been one thing left to say: Rocky! Overall, this episode was the highest moment for Mr. Grouse's character, where he came to realize he can have all the peace and quiet he wants, and it's rightfully deserved. However, the collective relationships he developed with the Loud family over the past few years ran very deep, their crazy mannerisms rubbed off on him in a big way, and he cared about those kids a lot more than he initially thought. The Louds value their crabby neighbor more than Grouse could have possibly imagined, and their hug towards the end was very emotional for all of them. I have my issue with the ending being rushed, and it honestly should have been changed. Maybe Grouse could remain at the cabin and then work in some type of storyline to get him to move back. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case, so what we got was as good as it was going to get. With that said, I give For Sale by Loner a 7.7 out of 10. Well, folks, that concludes my review of For Sale by Loner. Love him or hate him, we know the Louds can spice up a boring life, and for someone like Mr. Grouse who deals with that spice on a daily basis, it seems like he wouldn't trade it for the world. Home sweet home indeed. So what did you guys think of it? Love it? Hate it? Something you would add? Change? Keep it as it is? Let me know in the comments below. And make sure to subscribe to this channel for the latest Loud House content. That's going to do it for me. I'll catch you guys for the next video. But until then, this is SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, signing off. Peace out, home slices.